Today we're going to be talking about the best upper body quarterback throwing mechanics. Now, we spend a lot of time on this channel talking about the lower body throwing mechanics for quarterbacks. We talk about our base, we talk about having a short stride, we talk about hip rotation, and all of that is tied together with the upper body, and we're going to get to that throughout the course of this video, but we're going to break down every single facet of your upper body as a quarterback and what you want to focus on. So starting with the ball carriage, where should you be holding the ball? So a lot of quarterbacks, you see it on TV, maybe college guys, some highly rated high school guys, they may hold the ball a little low. You see a lot of older school quarterbacks from like the 1980s hold the ball up high on this like shelf right here. And then I would say what I recommend is middle of the chest or your right pec. And you want to be in a position called opposite equal, which means that your elbows opposite side, they are at an equal position. You want to be relaxed with your traps. Why is that important? Because you want the most range of motion as possible and you don't want to be tense. So a lot of times, and you want as quick of a release as possible. So a lot of times guys will hold the ball down here. When you throw, you're either going to lift the ball straight up, which is not mechanically sound, or you're going to have this really long motion where you dip down, and that wastes extra time, obviously. Number two, a lot of guys will hold the ball up top because they want this super quick release, but the issue is you're very tense in your traps and your shoulders, and you're creating energy and force up top that we don't need to create. All my power as a quarterback does not come from my upper body. It comes from my lower body, my hips, my legs, my core. So we want to be able to use that to its maximum potential. So that's why you want to be relaxed. Ball in the middle of your chest, right pec, wherever you're comfortable, opposite equal position so I get full range of motion. I'm not super tense, and my release can be as quick as possible. Now, playing the quarterback position is much more than just throwing mechanics, being able to throw with velocity, accuracy. You also need to be able to read a defense. You got to make correct decisions on the field. You got to know why defenses are in certain coverages. So if you need to improve your football IQ, you guys, check out that very first link in the description where you could get access to over 500 videos that I have made breaking down defensive coverages and teaching you how you can read defenses. We'll play a film up on a screen. I'll highlight the play, what you should be looking at, all from the quarterback's eye view. So guys, if you want to improve your football IQ, check out that very first link in the description below. Let's get back to this video. Now, the next facet of the quarterback upper body throwing mechanics we're going to talk about is the backstroke. So a lot of people, a lot of older school quarterback coaches used to teach when you throw, and let's say when your front foot makes contact, like I'm striding out to a target here, you should lift the ball straight up to 90 degrees. We do not want to do that. Now, the other spot that we don't want to be is I don't want to dip down with the ball, because when I go down with the ball, that's a very long process, longer release, and it can slow down our mechanical sequence. Now, why do we not want to lift the ball to 90 degrees? Because a lot of quarterback coaches will say you want to lift the ball to 90 so you could just be up and out and get the ball out of your hands. The problem with that is that's going to put an insane amount of pressure and stress on your shoulder, and that's not how my throwing sequence works. Let's talk about it. So if I lift the ball straight up to 90 degrees when my front foot gets down, where do I get my power and what do I have to rotate with as a quarterback? My hips and my core. So if I take a stride to the target and I lift the ball up to 90, as soon as I start to rotate with my hips, that ball is going to dip behind my head, because your rotator cuff, it rotates. And as a rotational athlete, as a quarterback, your hips and your rotator cuff are intermingled together. Your rotator cuff will work in two parts in your throwing sequence. So if you lift up and you rotate, that ball is going to go either behind your head, or it'll put a lot of stress on this like external rotation phase of the throw, and that could put a lot of strain on your arm. Not to mention that ball's over the top of your head, which can cause us to miss high and just be inconsistent with our sequence. So where do we want to be with that backstroke? A lot of people teach you want to get to the perfect opposite L angle. That's not where I need you to be. Would I like you to be there? Sure, why not? But it needs to be somewhere in this backstroke range. So when your front foot gets down, you guys, and those hips fire through, that's when we get up to 90 degrees. So my hips firing through, I'm pivoting through, and that's what gets me to this external rotation part of the throw. A lot of quarterbacks that have a ton of velocity on the ball all have external rotation. They're not releasing the ball with their shoulders straight like this. This ball is dipped slightly, almost like not behind your elbow, but your hip is coming through first. They have this like elasticity in their shoulder in a sense, and that's what can shoot the ball through, increasing the velocity and power I have on the ball. But that all starts with where our backstroke is. If I lift the ball, I lose that external rotation, and that is when I'm ultimately going to be pushing that thing. So guys, our backstroke, start of the motion, should be somewhere in this range on the foot strike, so the hips can bring me up to 90. So now the next element of your upper body throwing mechanics that we're going to discuss today is how it ties into your lower body mechanics. So guys, as a quarterback, you were built from the ground up. Everything starts with your feet. feet, anytime I'm working with a new quarterback, no matter what age it is, we start with their feet first before we even touch the upper half, because it's all intermingled and ties together. So when you guys go to throw that backstroke position, that like opposite L, somewhere in this range, you cannot get to that point if we do not have something called hip and shoulder dissociation, aka separation. So if I'm in my base, starts at my legs. I want to have about 65 to 70% of my weight on my back leg, and I want to be stacked. What does it mean to be stacked? I want my head, my knee, and my foot stacked on top of each other, so my weight is shifted back, so I'm in a position to where when my front foot gets down, I step to the target. You want to keep your weight loaded on your back leg, but this helps you get to a backstroke position. I'm loaded back here, I stride to the target. I want my front shoulder to rotate back slightly, pushing me to this backstroke position. So now when the front foot's down, my weight's back, what brings the arm through? My hips. But when my hips fire through before my shoulders do, that creates a whipping effect. That gets me to that external rotation spot, and that's what gets me more velocity on the ball. So when it comes down to your upper body mechanics, you guys, you have to make sure that as I step to the target, my front shoulder is rotating slightly, pushing me to that backstroke. My hands are separating, but my weight is staying loaded back. We can't get to the proper upper half mechanics if I do not have the proper lower body mechanics, keeping my weight back as my front stride gets down to allow my hips to shoot through on time. Now, the next element of the upper body throwing sequence or throwing mechanics is going to be our release point, our arm slot, and our follow through. So again, a lot of this is tied in together with your hips. So one of the common mistakes that quarterbacks will make is that when they throw, they will drop their front arm. So this is something that we need to have. 2 points of emphasis. Like, let's say I'm throwing to the camera right now. When I release the ball, I want my shoulders and my hips to be completely parallel to the target. So if I'm throwing a post over here to the left, I want my hips and my shoulders parallel to the target. I don't want to be facing over here with my hips and shoulders and trying to push this ball over the middle. I want to stay parallel. I call it staying square. You should be able to draw a square from your hips all the way up to your shoulders facing the target. Number 2, a lot of quarterbacks, a lot of old school quarterback coaches would teach this, is to take this elbow and swing it down as a source of power. Now, the reason why that's a problem is because that can push your release point high and give you this overly high release point where we're missing high or missing low. Now, let me backtrack a couple steps. Why do we want to stay square? We want to stay square because if I take, like, let's say I'm throwing this post over here and my front shoulder and hip are ripping open, that causes my arm to fly, and that gives me this wide, almost a cross release point, aka sidearm, and it's not the good type of sidearm where I'm changing up my arm slot to throw around a defender. So where we want to stay, you guys, I want my hips and my shoulders to stay parallel. I want my front hand up by my face like I am eating a sandwich to make sure that my release point can stay inside of my body frame. Now, I'm not a big arm slot guy who's like, oh, you have to be here or you have to be here. There are many different arm slots. If you're throwing a touch corner ball, it's going to be a different arm slot than if you're throwing a check down to your running back around the center. A lot of people like to say that this is the only arm slot that we should have. Incorrect. And a lot of people like to say this is the only arm slot we should have. That's incorrect too. You look at all 32 NFL starters, they all have different arm slots and they all throw the ball differently on different types of throws. It's a little naive to think that one arm slot is the answer to every single type of throw. So we want to be just inside my frame. That's what I want you guys to think about. When I stride to the target, my weight stays back, my shoulders go back, my hips are firing through first. I stay level with my hips and my shoulders, my hands up by my face, releases inside my frame. So how do we want to follow through? A lot of quarterback coaches, old school, would teach, oh, you want to pull the money out of your opposite pocket. What I've come to learn with working with a lot of guys is that when they pull the money, they tend to over-rotate and swing their front side, which causes that wide release point, missing left to right. So I honestly just need you to extend. When you release the ball, I want my arm to extend and your hand, your wrist flick should be almost 6 inches in front of your front foot. That's probably the magic spot that we want to get to. And then if my arm finishes here, or it falls, or it goes opposite pocket, I really don't have a preference, but that's where I need to be with my release, my arm slot, and my follow through on the throw.